You're not alone in this. About 47% of Americans suffer from an addiction in any given year. That means that actually most Americans suffer from some type of addiction at some point in their life. So if you suffer from addiction, you're actually in the majority and most definitely not alone. Now that doesn't mean that half of America is addicted to drugs or alcohol this year, but that they're addicted to something. That number comes from a huge study that looked at a list of addictive processes. Those included tobacco, alcohol, illicit drugs, eating, gambling, internet, sex, exercise, work, and shopping. All the good stuff. Because addiction is a process beneath so much of human behavior. It's very common for someone to become addicted to several of these because they all come from the same root causes of addiction. It's the root causes that we'll be going over, because if we take care of that, then we take care of all different kinds of addiction you might be suffering from now or in the future. Another interesting fact is that only 1 in 10 addicted people ever get help for it. That means that out of 10 people you know who are addicted to something, only 1 of them, on average, will get help. So if it's taken you a while to finally do something about it, you're not alone in that either. One of the most common reasons people don't get help is because they think they're a bad person for being addicted and have too much shame to talk about it. Some of the other issues are practical ones, like not having enough time or money to get into a treatment. I hope that over the course of this program, you learn that you've become addicted because of life experience, not because you're a bad person. And I hope this gets you more comfortable talking about your life and experiences with addiction so that you can continue to get good support forever and even help other people along the way. Anytime you want to start a major process and make a real change, you have to pay careful attention to your environment and set yourself up for the best chance at success. I've seen so many patients who are in great programs but didn't get anything out of it because they weren't set up to take it in and absorb it. Let's go over the key factors and how to do this. The right timing. Now is the time to do this. You may have heard a lot of people say that you have to hit rock bottom before you can recover. Well, the studies show this is just false. So don't wait until life's at its worst. There's no reason to wait. It's always best to interrupt any addictive pattern as soon as you have the motivation to. So now's the time. If you're at your rock bottom, now's the time. If you're heading that way, now's the time. No more waiting. Don't wait for life to get worse. Do this now. The second thing is, don't rush. A common issue in addiction is impatience. It's likely going to be a struggle to keep yourself from rushing through the lessons and reflections. I hope it goes without saying that it's going to be a much more meaningful experience to go through it at a pace you can absorb and integrate the information. There's a reason most students don't retain information well. They're talked at and not given time to use and practice the information. Give yourself the time to practice lessons and reflect on where you are as a person. The questions after each lesson can be quite challenging and deep. If you rush through them, you're only going to get information, but not change. It's better you go way slower than you want, but understand the lessons and how they apply to you, than breeze through and not find any meaningful impact. The change comes from practice and integration. So please resist the urge to rush and don't cheat yourself from the chance to truly change. Create routine. To the best of your ability, find a quiet and peaceful room or portion of a room to do this in. I recommend not having music on while you're learning and making a routine where you work on this at the same time of day, every day. That way, your own brain and people you're close with get used to that time being protected. It's too hard to do this at different times each day, and sometimes for 1 minute, and sometimes for a few hours. I remember a patient who started from a really bad spot, but he really surprised everyone. His secret was that he created a solid routine, so he just continued to get better and better bit by bit. Clear a space. Put away distractions like music, video games, movies, or anything that tends to pull you away from what you're doing. Tell friends that you think might interrupt you or cause a relapse that you need some time and distance from them, and that you'll let them know when you're ready to socialize again, so they don't have to keep asking. Make an inviting space. Consider bringing in items or pictures that are grounding, inspirational, and calming. Use things that help bring you focus or remind you why you care, so that when you have distracting thoughts and feelings, which you will, you have something to draw on. Put up pictures of people you care about or look up to, or pictures from your happiest times, or items you cherish, or quotes that inspire you. Keep life simple. Remove all your major barriers for a while. Remove anything extra going on in life that can be put on pause. Anything you tend to spend lots of time with that isn't absolutely necessary is going to make this effort a lot harder. Think about what you can put on hold for a little while. Things like extra activities, going out, movies, Facebook, and surfing the internet or reading books that aren't really going to help you right now. Do more than you think you need to. If you really want to prepare well for a test or some kind of competition, you need to do way more than just what you feel like you really have to do. If you only do what you feel like you need to do, you might not have enough resilience to handle when a big stressor hits you. You want to be doing so well that if a stressor hits you, you're able to handle it. A lot of the things we'll cover might not feel urgent for you right now, but they're likely to be an issue later, or might be an issue now and you don't even realize it yet. Just give yourself the best chance and do more than you think you need to do. Put in the time. There's a saying it takes 10,000 hours to gain a new skill, but that's just based on achieving expert level skill in a competitive way. Really, any time you spend on your health will be rewarded many times over. Don't think about this as something you need to get perfect. The more you put in, the more you'll get out. So anything you do is worth it. Don't expect this or anything to make you healthy. Only you can make yourself healthy. If you wait for something or someone to change you, you'll be waiting forever. There's no magic idea or product that does the work for you. Just like nobody can exercise for you, nobody can make you content or make you happy for you. Anything, including this program, is only a guide, but you have to take the steps. It's your effort that's the closest thing to magic. It'd be like taking a helicopter to the top of a mountain and saying to the person who climbed it, "Yeah, I get this. It's pretty from up here." We can't fully appreciate where we're going wrong or what feels right unless we really practice these things and do the work. Pace yourself. This is going to push you as a person, and if you're the type to jump all into things, you're going to get tired and worn out very fast. This is self-paced, so please ask yourself along the way whether you're doing it at a good pace for you. Treat this like a physical workout, where you want to do enough to grow muscle, but not so hard and so much that you don't give your muscle time to repair and grow stronger. This might feel like a race since you're hopefully very ready to move forward with life, but try not to do this so fast that you can't absorb the lessons. I've seen lots of people who come out of the gates super excited, but fizzle out a few weeks later. I want you to go slowly enough that you could work on this forever. Play around with the lessons and take as much time as you want between them until you feel ready to move on. You'll be better off pacing yourself, which makes it more enjoyable and even help to make it more effective. Don't trick yourself. Most of life, we're used to playing games with ourselves in our head, rationalizing and lying, hiding from reality. Your mind will play games and say things to yourself like, "Don't try that, you'll fail anyway," or "That won't work for you, you're a bad person, so nothing will work." Well, now there's nobody to game or trick but your own self. It's just you on the other side of that game. Even though you're only listening to a recording of me, you'll still notice defenses come up, and that's okay. We want to explore that and learn from it. Move towards hard topics. If you're like just about anyone else, you want to race through and get concepts and say, "Check, I've got it," and move on. Don't do that. Now is the time to do the opposite. Be honest with yourself and address your weaknesses. Anything that's very challenging or confusing is just where you need to focus. You might need to rework some of the lessons and spend a huge amount of time on one small area. That's fine. Nobody's watching but you. We only grow as much as our weakest link. If you're in a team race, there's not much use in getting the fastest person even faster if you're still going to have to wait for the slowest teammate. Now's the time to become interested in your weakest links. I hope you have the courage to move towards your most challenging areas. You may have heard a lot about interventions or tactics that throw a lot in someone's face in hopes that it'll make the person finally get it or care enough to change. While that can work for some people, the studies don't support doing that. Many more people start and then stick with rehab and improve when they're met with support and compassion. So be kind to yourself, and I hope others can be kind to you too. Have fun with this. And when you recognize ugly parts of yourself, Just have fun with it and tease or laugh at yourself the same way you would if you poked fun at a best friend. Don't resist help. Lots of people hate the idea that they need help. Well, we all need help all the time. It's just a matter of degree. You think you're cooking on your own? You're using hundreds of years of innovation and technology to use a molded piece of aluminum. Then you turn on a stove that other people made and make something using ingredients that other people grew and delivered. Nobody does even the simplest things on their own. We use pens, paper, computers, books, and things written and printed for us, washing machines, cars, air conditioning. Unless you're a caveman grunting and hunting on your own, you're probably using way more help than you'd like to think. Get over yourself and reach out for help whenever you need it. When your trajectory turns in the right direction and is positive, you're actually already done. You just have to continue that trajectory over time. If this was a finance course and you started saving money every day, you'd already be rich because you already have the right process in place and just need to continue what you're doing now, but over time to get there. With addiction, when you can start living each day in an emotionally healthy way, you're already good because that process will take you as far as you want to go. It's very common for people who work on addiction to end up way healthier than their friends and family because of all the changes they make. Don't carry the weight of all the changes you need to make right now. Just carry the weight of the changes needed today to create those life changes over a lifetime. You probably have way too many parts of life to clean up in a few weeks. Don't think of this as a way to clean up everything just over the weeks of this program. Instead, think of this as a time to learn a process that you can then go through and use for the rest of your life as you slowly take on everything you want to clean up about yourself. If you feel too unsafe to do this program for any reason, please follow your instinct. Some common safety issues are if you need immediate detox, or maybe you're in an unsafe situation where people are trying to hurt you, or just emotionally unable to do this right now. If any of those are the case, consider common sense ways of getting safe. I had a patient who came to rehab to escape a hit placed on him. You can imagine he couldn't concentrate very well and didn't get much out of it. You also may need to go to a detox facility or a residential rehab, or just stay at a friend's place. If you're suicidal and don't know if you can keep yourself alive, consider checking yourself into a psychiatric ward. And as a last resort, you can always go to an ER if you're medically or psychologically unstable and don't know where else to go. Nobody just automatically changes things about themselves. Our minds actually go through a series of steps that gets us to the change. If you understand the science of behavior change, you can have a much better chance of reaching your goals. Let's go over the stages of change so that you can get an idea of where you might be right now. Each stage has its own goal. The first stage is called pre-contemplation. This is where you have no intention to change your behavior. People might suggest you change, but you're unaware or haven't ever thought about why you'd need to change. If you're in this stage, it's probably because you were forced to do this program. People who don't acknowledge or admit to a problem can still get help from this, but it usually doesn't last as long. If you're in this stage, your goal would be to consider the possibility that your addiction creates problems in your life. If you can, consider asking people who know you what they think of your behavior so you can get other people's perspectives and piece things together. It's not a bad thing to be here because we all have to go through this stage before moving on. Even if you're forced to do this program, you'll pick up a lot of knowledge that'll probably open your mind up to how your behaviors might be hurting you. The second stage is contemplation. This is when you're aware of the problem and seriously considering a change, but still not ready to make a commitment to take action. The goal in this stage is to raise awareness of the effects from addiction by observing and noticing what effects it has on your life. Take clues in and try to make sense of the effects addiction has on you. The beginning of the addiction section will help give you a chance to reflect on what your addiction's done to you. It's fine to be fully aware of your issues, but not quite ready to do too much about it. Remember, we all have to pass through every step, so it's completely normal. As you learn more about addiction, you'll naturally move out of this stage when you become more interested in what a different life could feel like. The third stage is preparation. In this stage, you intend to change and start to actually make a plan to make small changes and think about what you need to do to make that happen. The goal of this stage is to commit to small steps and continue planning for the change you want to make. If you decided to do this on your own, you're probably in this stage already, since doing this program is definitely a major step to take to change your addictive patterns. In this stage, you get everything set up to get started and figure out what you need to do and take care of to make a real effort. If you're at this stage, the last lesson on setting yourself up for success is going to be really important to take some time for. My intention is for this program to help with this stage as your guide for how to put your efforts into action in the best way. You'll be able to take in all the lessons, but probably need some time to figure out how to actually practice them. That's fine, because you'll be able to go back and do lessons again and figure out which things you want to practice the most. The fourth stage is called action. This is when things really start to happen. In this stage, you've already made a clear decision to take significant action to change and put your plans into motion. You might be in this stage already if you've been in some kind of treatment before or done some type of self-help, where you learned what to do, but are still trying to put that into action. This program will help to give you new or different things to put into action, since whatever you're putting into action right now isn't working well enough. If this is your first try at stopping your addiction, this is the stage you'll be in after you start to actually practice the lessons in this program. The average time people need in this action stage to make their change is about 6 months. The more help you get in this stage, the better you'll do. Your goal in this stage would be to continue to put a plan into action, but make sure you seek out good guidance and support. You can keep practicing either by using another treatment, like a therapist or doctor, or reworking some of these lessons. We'll take care of a lot of that, but that's where having anybody else in your corner to guide you will only help. In this stage, you also want to notice any positive benefits to your life from your changes so that you're encouraged to continue them. To do that, you can use the checklists on life balance and belonging if you want to keep track of how you might be growing as a person the further you get into this. The fifth stage is the last one, which is maintenance. Once you made positive changes, it's easy to slip back into old patterns, since that's how you've lived for so long. This stage is extremely important to prevent relapse and continue the gains you already made. This program is designed to help you put tons of skills in place to keep you from slipping back. You want enough in place that even when you make mistakes or even relapse, you bounce right back. The research shouldn't surprise you that the longer people stay in the maintenance stage, the better their chances for staying healthy. The goal in this last step is to find ways to make your change through a new routine and recognize that any thoughts or behaviors that might trip you up can be dealt with. You can see we don't just jump from not caring about addiction straight to maintaining sobriety. It's a process, and it helps to know where you are in the journey so that you can know what your immediate goal should be. This program is meant to address any type of addiction. Throughout the videos, I'll use examples of several types of addiction. If I use words like substance, drugs, alcohol, or anything else addictive, please know that the same things would apply for other types of addiction too. Once you begin to work on things, you'll start to understand that we can be addicted to more than just chemicals, and more than just food, or sex, or gambling, or gaming. We even get addicted to things like work, or exercise, or even our own thoughts. The more you can hear the messages and lessons in a broad way, the more you'll learn about all your behaviors and cravings. Substances don't cause addiction. If you think that the drugs or alcohol you use have automatically led to your addiction, think again. Let's take a look at the science behind why we now know that addiction is about more than just getting hooked on addictive chemicals. Consider that about 90% of people who regularly use drugs or drink never become addicted. How could that be if substances just grab hold and cause addiction on their own? Also, most heavy drinkers don't have alcohol dependence. For example, even in people who have 5 or more drinks a day, only 7% of them get addicted. If drugs and alcohol were so addictive, then why aren't the majority of people using them getting addicted? Or consider one of the finest studies of addiction that showed that the types of people who experiment with moderate amounts of pot are actually psychologically healthier than the type of person who refuses to ever smoke. Or look at a large review that showed no significant risk of addiction to painkillers if they're prescribed appropriately for pain. One of the most famous examples to make the point is a study of American soldiers in Vietnam. Because of their stress in combat, 20% of those American soldiers became addicted. And not just any addiction to heroin, which is considered highly addictive. After they returned home from war, 95% of the soldiers were no longer addicted. How is it that almost all of them were cured on their own? If chemicals automatically cause addiction, then why weren't all of their brains becoming addicted? And you know all those rat studies that show how doomed they are after getting addicted to drugs? Well, those studies actually force the rats to stay addicted by not giving them options. Want to know what happens if you take an addicted rat and give them more space in their cage or more things to play with and keep sane? They stop their addiction. Even if they have the drugs available and right there in front of them, the ones who are in larger cages don't stay addicted. Thinking that substances themselves automatically lead to addiction is old thinking. If you get this, you're way ahead of most of the world in understanding addiction. If it seems too hard to believe, sit on it for a bit or read the articles listed below. Also ask yourself, why isn't the whole world addicted if most people experiment with drugs and alcohol? Substances themselves do not cause addiction. It's an addictive mind that finds substances. There have been plenty of reports that addiction is due to your genetics. Twin, adoption, and half-sibling genetic studies have claimed that 50 to 70% of the addiction to alcohol or drugs is caused by your genes. The problem with that is it's a very simplistic explanation filled with statistical flaws. Why is it that someone can have all the genes that cause addiction and never become addicted? Or why do some people, without any of the genes for addiction, become very addicted? A quote by a prominent addiction specialist, Lance Dodds, said it well. The most important finding of research into a genetic role for alcoholism is that there is no such thing as a gene for alcoholism. It's true that some genes are associated with drinking, but genes still exist in an environment. Our genes actually turn on and off all the time. The cells in our skin have the same genes as our heart. So how do some cells turn into a heart and others turn into skin? Because of something called genetic expression. Our genes only get turned on in certain places and at certain times. The same thing happens with genes seen in addiction. There's no such thing as a gene causing addiction. It's just there and ready to turn on in certain conditions. How do we know this? Well, it's been seen in plenty of good studies. In one done on monkeys, the gene that can cause monkeys to drink heavily was turned off if they were raised by their mothers. But in the other group of monkeys that were exposed to high stress early in life, that gene was turned on. So we don't only turn genes on and off with certain food or exercise or toxins, but also with things like love and nurturing or stress and anger. So if a study is done on twins and says that their genes caused their addiction, you can see that they really missed the point. Those genes can be turned on or off based on how those fetuses were treated in the womb. If the pregnant mother has huge stress, or abuses drugs, or suffers from depression, those all affect the fetus. So the genes themselves may not be the cause, even when it looks like it was. Most people love to feel like they found the cause for addiction or any disease, but the reality is it's much more complex. It's easier to blame addiction on a gene than it is to address the reality that how you're raised really matters, and matters much more than your genes. Fortunately, we can turn our genes on and off at any point in life. We can do this in so many ways, like with vegetables or exercise, but most importantly, with things like love and belonging. When I ask a patient about their family history of addiction, I'm not so concerned about whether they have bad genes. What I'm thinking about when I ask that is, what kind of conditions were they in? How were they raised? If you have a raging alcoholic for a parent, you're more affected by their parenting of you than you are from their genes. Another piece of information people put out there is that the brain of an addict is different, and that it causes them to be impulsive or seek out high risks and lead to addiction. It's true that an image like a functional MRI does show differences between the brain of an addict and a non-addict, but that doesn't mean that their different brain caused their addiction. First, let's explain how the brain works. If you learn any skill, your brain changes. Anything you practice or do a lot will grow certain parts of your brain and shrink others. A famous example of this is a study that looked at the brains of cab drivers. It turned out that in cab drivers, the part of the brain that's used for directions, mapping, and location, they were all way larger than an average brain. That part of their brain wasn't bigger before they became cab drivers, it grew because they were cab drivers. It's the same with addiction. If you become impulsive and you become addicted, your brain will change, but that doesn't mean your brain was different from the start. Also, you wouldn't say that the cab drivers have cab driving disease or that their brain made them drive a cab. It's the same with addiction. Your brain didn't make you addicted, but it is true that your addiction may have caused your brain to change as a result. The good news is that those changes usually aren't permanent or irreversible. We'll teach you how to actually rewire the brain so it can get healthy again. We've learned in more recent neuro research that the brain can change an enormous amount at any age, so don't worry. Get yourself healthy and your brain will heal. You'll hear a lot of people say that they have an addictive personality and that that's why they're addicted. First of all, there's no clinical personality disorder called addictive personality. What people are really saying when they say this is that they're impulsive or don't think very far ahead or have intense cravings. And those things aren't disorders or personality issues, they're just characteristics and attributes. Even more importantly, those are all natural and helpful attributes to have. You wouldn't say you have a sports personality. You would just say your mind enjoys competition or exercise more than other people you know. It's the same with being impulsive. It's just a characteristic that everyone has, and some have more of it than others. So there's no such thing as an addictive personality, but it is clear there are traits that lead to addiction, like impulsivity, emotional lability, and a lack of belonging. If you wonder about an addictive personality because you're trying to figure out whether you're just going to stay the way you are, no matter how much treatment you get, the answer is no. Your traits can adapt as much as you work on them. You weren't born with addiction. Your addictive traits developed from experiences. And because those traits came from experiences, that also means that new thoughts and experiences can help you grow into different traits. We'll be doing this by helping you to expand your characteristics, not totally changing who you are. So think of it as expanding who you are, not necessarily changing who you are. Another case is made by friends, family, politicians, and the media that addiction is a choice, and anyone who stays in addiction is just making bad choices. This was seen most clearly when Nancy Reagan, the First Lady to President Ronald Reagan, launched a war on drugs, and there was a campaign in the 1980s teaching people to just say no to drugs. This suggested that it's a simple choice to make, and addicts are just poor decision makers. Well, the problem with that is that I've yet to meet an addict who didn't want to stop their addiction. Unfortunately, we go through life in automatic ways almost all the time. It's not just an issue of weighing the pros and cons of drugs. Studies now show that our brains decide on things way before we even know that it did. So scientists who have wires hooked up to someone's brain can tell what choice they're going to make before the person actually making the choice knows. Another really cool experiment was done when a welder challenged an engineer to ride a bike he had made that was hooked up backwards. So if you tried to turn it to the right, it turned left, and if you tried to turn it to the left, it turned right. Everyone thought it'd be so easy. Just turn right when you know you need to turn left. Simple. Well, what happened was nobody could ride it. It took the engineer 8 months to learn how to ride it. So why did people think it would be so easy? Because we like to believe that our behaviors are simple choices. But the truth is that everything we do has become so automatic, and that even when we try with all our might, we can still make bad choices. Addiction is absolutely not about being stupid or senseless or morally wrong. The people trying to ride the bike knew just what to do, but they still couldn't do it. They weren't stupid or uncoordinated. Their brains just hadn't been given enough time and practice to change. Please watch the video link below and watch people trying to ride the bike for yourself. Because what happened with this bike is no different than what happens with addiction. I know you know what a good choice is, but you just can't do it right now because it's still not automatic. It's so important to understand this fact of how the brain works, because you can see that we're not in full control of our choices a lot of the time. To change or make new choices, we have to work at changing our automatic choices and behaviors. The term for this is called implicit cognition, which means we don't actually think with the planning part of our brains. Our choices are very subconscious and driven by so many factors that we're not even aware of. The same way we don't have to think about breathing or moving our legs when we walk, our brain also leads us to certain behaviors even when we don't realize it's happening. So yes, your choices might be bad ones, but most of the time your choices are not fully conscious ones that you can fully control. Even when you think it's a fully conscious choice you could control, it's usually not. In fact, studies show that the more you think your addiction is caused by bad choices, the more difficult it will be for you to stop it. I definitely see this with my patients. It always takes people much longer to get better when they feel like they're morally wrong. We're all wired for addiction because we actually need the addictive part of our brains in order to live. We all have an addiction circuit in our brain. Everyone. We need it to operate. Think about this. How does anyone know what feels good? How does anyone get motivation to do anything at all? Those very basic functions of any animal require some sort of operating system, and that's the addiction circuit. It uses dopamine as our motivation chemical that we rely on to go after what makes us feel good and give us the motivation and drive to seek them out. Every animal needs to eat to survive, and any species needs to have enough sex to have enough offspring to stick around on Earth. The system uses another chemical, our natural opioids, to help us feel pleasure and connection and love. That helps guide us so we know exactly what feels right, or figure out who's loving and protective, what places we enjoy, and what experiences to try to have more of. Our body actually needs this addiction pathway in order to get us to do things required to live, or else we'd waste away on a couch somewhere and not even care. We need to crave and be motivated enough to seek the reward of food, or else we starve. We need to crave and be motivated enough to seek the reward of love, or else we're lonely and isolated. We need to crave and be motivated enough to seek the reward of security, or else we're too vulnerable and scared of things in our environment, like storms or violence. We need to want those things enough that we don't let ourselves waste away. One example of this is a study where they looked at an image of brain activity in drug addiction versus love. Guess what? They light up the same area. The drive for a substance uses the same machinery we rely on that drives us to seek love. And that's not just about going after the things we crave. We even need our addiction pathway to sometimes make us impulsive about it. In ancient times, we needed to sometimes be impulsive enough to take risks and hunt down animals that could hurt us, or be adventurous and find new land to settle in, or be impulsive enough to fight and defend ourselves against threats that might be very dangerous. And today, we rely on impulsive acts for courageous efforts, or to speak out when everyone else is freezing up. If we aren't impulsive at all, we can get frozen in decisions. Our brains are actually designed well and have the machinery for addiction for very good reasons that have led us to where we are today. Our species has always relied on addiction for impulsive acts and decisions, and relies on addiction to know what we want more of. True, we don't want impulses to be too strong, and we don't live in ancient times anymore. You still do want to work on impulsivity and cravings, and it's obviously led you to harmful patterns, or you wouldn't be doing this program. But please don't think about addiction as horrible or wrong. It's just a little too strong for you and must be causing more harm than good right now. That's all. Don't view this as an illness, but instead as an over-adaptation to your environment. The machinery of your mind and body aren't broken. It's actually that they're working too well and too much. If you were living in a different time or place, your addiction may have led you to be well-fed and find mates. In another world, you might be doing really well just as you are. Now's the time to adapt to the life you're in the present. Let's start to talk now about how addiction begins. If all our brains are wired for addiction so that we have craving, motivation, and reward for all kinds of things, then why do some of us suffer from it while others don't? Good research shows that it doesn't begin with your first drink or substance. It begins much earlier, often as a small child or even in the womb. The three key characteristics of children that are well shown to lead to addiction are 1. Lack of belonging, 2. Poor impulse control, and 3. Emotional distress. And don't think for a second that those characteristics come from nowhere. Our environment and upbringing have a huge influence on how we experience life, self-soothe, and regulate our emotions. So what does childhood typically look like in addiction? The child's parents are often cold, not very responsive to the child's needs, and don't protect the child very well. Parents often don't give much encouragement and praise, and are more concerned about their child's performance than enjoying the experience. Rather than helping the child do well, they pressure them and set expectations without showing them how to do it. On top of that, the child's parents criticize them a lot, reject their ideas, and usually aren't very proud of them. What all that means is that nothing is really pleasant or fun for that child growing up. That child's experience leads them to feel like life is unpleasant, hard, and their efforts aren't recognized. They feel like there's no reason to try at something because it won't be fun and it won't be appreciated. That child learns that they can only be appreciated or belong if they please other people, so things become empty and meaningless. The child sees that they're on their own and they don't feel very wanted. They often also don't get enough quality, close relationships where they feel love, connection, and compassion. This leads to a lack of belonging that can be felt with friends and at school too, since they assume that that's how all relationships will go. That can lead to distrust and a hard time getting close to people. They also usually witness short tempers and emotional stress, and don't learn to be able to sit with feelings and either talk about them or to be able to tolerate stress. That might look like yelling, or one of the parents crying or breaking down really easily. The child's parents usually get even more upset if they try to talk about feelings to their parents, so the child learns quickly to not express themselves. And if the child doesn't have any good role models that show them how to handle stress, all they know is how to be impulsive and emotionally labile. As that child grows up, they develop all the characteristics that cause addiction. The child now feels like they're alone because nobody really connects with them or helps them in a caring and compassionate way. They have poor impulse control after years of watching role models who are impulsive, get frustrated easily, and can't handle stress. And they're constantly emotionally distressed or even depressed because life is just painful and hard. They feel like they have to meet all kinds of expectations and get punished if they don't. They never learn to have fun and enjoy the journey of life. If this fits you at all, it's no wonder you suffer from addiction. But lots of people go through just some of these experiences and still develop addiction. I've actually never treated a patient for addiction that didn't have at least some of these go on for them. This isn't about bashing your parents or role models. We're not talking about this so you can blame anything on anyone. We're simply bringing it up to understand your story. We all have our own perceptions. The people who helped shape you might have seen themselves as caring and been trying to raise you well, but what's most important is what you perceived and felt. It doesn't matter what a referee would say about whether you were raised well or not. It just matters what you were left feeling like. You'll get in the way of moving forward if you feel so guilty that you're afraid to say what might have led to your issues. No matter how much of this you went through, you're still going to want to work on these key characteristics to finally break your addictive pattern. A stressful upbringing, like we just described, doesn't just affect our memory. Remember the way our brain needs dopamine to feel motivation and opiates to feel warm and nice? Well, stressful childhoods actually cause the brain to have less opiate and dopamine receptors. That makes it harder for your brain to feel those things, like love and belonging or motivation. So a childhood with less nurturing and protection and praise will disrupt the brain from developing its own healthy amounts of chemicals to feel things like reward, pleasure, and soothing. An extreme example is seen with babies who are just born. When I was doing my medical training on the newborn unit of a hospital, they made sure to tell us that the babies needed lamps to warm them, and they also needed to be picked up and stroked for a while. If a baby is born perfectly healthy and even fed, but doesn't feel the warmth of touch, guess what happens? It can literally die. Babies need to be held, stroked, and protected enough, or they'll die. I try to never forget that. Our bodies need warmth and love. If a baby dies without warmth and love, Just imagine what this does to our physical health if we live for years without ever getting enough of that. If we're neglected or abused or always criticized, it changes our pleasure and motivation brain circuit, so it becomes harder to feel those things. Later in life, when you become addicted to something, all of a sudden you start flooding your brain with dopamine. Anything that's addictive triggers a huge increase in dopamine release, which is just what your brain has been craving for so many years, so it feels so good. Patients often describe a warm feeling, or feeling like they're being held or cared for, or like they're being wrapped in a warm blanket when they take a hit. It's no wonder it's so hard to stop. Even addictive behaviors like eating, sex, and gambling cause huge surges in dopamine. But the problem is that after a while of getting dopamine from a substance or addictive behavior, your body forgets how to make it on its own and becomes lazy. Your body's own ability to produce dopamine gets weaker and weaker, so you only rely more and more on addiction to get excited. Fortunately, the brain can relearn and produce lots of dopamine, but you have to give it time. This usually takes several months, but if you can do that, your brain will have its own reward system back. This is one of the reasons people relapse, because our brains can't just change after a few days of being sober. Anyone who demands or expects that you stop your addiction right now, after years of an addiction, doesn't understand that it isn't just about a bad choice you're making. You have to let science happen and let your brain heal. Any small amount you can reduce your addiction by is a huge step in the right direction. It's not an all or none thing. Any improvement you make is helpful to rewire. Addiction is defined by the National Institute on Drug Abuse as a chronic, relapsing brain disease that's characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. Sounds nice, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong. The problem with that definition is that it just states the fact. It doesn't really help us understand what's actually happening, or how to move forward, aside from just saying, don't compulsively use anymore. Well, if it's compulsive, then by definition, you can't do anything about it. And that's just not the case. Instead, we can begin to discuss a deeper understanding of what's specifically happening in any moment of addiction. Our definition of addiction for this program will be a trained pattern of seeking pleasure to escape intolerable painful emotion. I'll say it again. Addiction is when we've been trained to seek pleasure to escape intolerable painful emotion. Said another way, you've been trained so that you can't stop a pleasure that hurts more than it helps. So now, if we want to change our addictive patterns, we have a way forward. We can think about how to change the pleasures we seek. And most importantly, we can begin to understand and think about the painful emotion driving us that way. We also see that when we talk about addiction, we're talking about anything we use to escape pain. Most people in addiction medicine recognize now that even things like exercise or shopping can be part of an addictive process, even if there aren't terrible consequences. Just because you have a lot of money and can afford a shopping addiction doesn't mean you don't suffer from an addicted mind. We shouldn't have to wait until we get into trouble with the law or debt for people to call it addiction. Now that we have our definition of addiction, let's break the steps down. Now that we've gone through an overview of how addiction develops early on and a definition, let's start to look deeper into how to think about your addiction. I'll introduce a model to understand it that can help you break down the different parts of addiction. We need to break it down into its parts because in this program, we're going to go carefully through each step to kill your addiction once and for all. Remember, we're not just going to go after the end result of addiction. We're going through all the steps the mind takes before it even gets there. Let's dive in. Addiction is like being in a very strong current, going down the path of least resistance. When you feel any type of painful emotion, you start to get swept away with the current that takes you to pleasure at any cost. Your mind and body do everything they can to get away from pain and towards pleasure. That path is your path of least resistance right now. Just like a river forms by going down the easiest path it can, our minds do the same thing. However your mind has been trained so far in your life is how your mind is going to handle pain. And after a while, the river keeps making that path more and more routine and automatic. It becomes a very strong current that can take over your life and make it feel impossible to get out of. You're not even swimming. There's no control. The river is taking you to pleasure as fast and easily as possible, because it's the path of least resistance. This is how addiction is felt. You feel pain, then have a craving for an escape, then go for that escape with whatever you're addicted to, and then reach a place of comfort and pleasure from a high. Over and over and over, all the time. We can go through this current several times an hour even. Some people live in this current their whole lives. You can try to fight the current, but getting free from addiction is about getting out of this river altogether. That's what makes us human. It means fighting the path of least resistance and creating a whole new way. True freedom comes when you can find the edge of the river, crawl out, and watch it from the river's edge. The river still goes on doing its thing and flows, but you're on the side watching. That's health. Every moment outside of the current is one where you are truly alive. Now let's go through each step of the current to understand how it works. The first step is the feeling of a painful emotion. This is the very beginning of the current. It's where all the water in the current flows from. The painful feeling might be anxiety, panic, sadness, anger, loneliness, emptiness, boredom, guilt, or it could be relational pain like rejection, feeling like an outsider or an outcast, or feeling undeserving, anything that's unpleasant, anything that doesn't feel good and your body says, get away from this. If we look at our definition again, addiction is when we seek pleasure to escape intolerable painful emotion. This first step, feeling a painful emotion, is the core of addiction. It's what drives all the other steps in addiction to happen. If you don't have pain, then alcohol and drugs are just recreational. If you have a friend who can stop whenever they want, it's because they don't have an intolerable pain. When they get drunk or high, they're just doing it for fun. They're not needing to get away from a painful state. The reason you can't stop isn't because you're weak or slow. It's because it's such a relief to get away from your pain. You're in the current. You can see how if you don't take care of the pain, which is the core of addiction, you'll never be free from it. If you don't know what your pain is, don't worry. We'll go through exercises that'll help you identify what kind of pains you have, powerful ways to live with it, and concepts that'll help you even be able to get rid of even your worst feelings through acceptance and forgiveness. The second step in addiction is craving. If you have pain but don't have a craving for something to escape it, then you don't get addiction and the current stop. It's only when we believe that any pain is bad that we continue on to the second step of craving. Pain leads directly to craving because your mind is trying to come up with any option to numb or escape from the pain. As soon as you experience pain, your mind starts to think about how to get out. The escape might be by numbing yourself, or by distracting, or feeling euphoric. But somehow, you're wanting a way to escape a painful feeling. It's only natural that our body wants to avoid that state. It's how we're built. This is the part of your brain that's actually over-adapted. If you were a caveman, your brain would probably be very good at getting away from a bear and finding a safer place to stay. It makes sense that you want to be in the current and let it sweep you away from pain and towards pleasure. You're actually too good at getting away from something painful. Your mind is pumping dopamine into your system to motivate you to end the pain and go for your pleasure. Your mind thinks that craving something is your way out, but it's not. It only makes the current stronger and faster. What you crave doesn't depend on how good a person you are. I get some executives who are workaholics and think they're better than a meth addict. No, you're just as addicted as the next guy. Just because work or exercise is your addiction doesn't make you better than anyone. You're going to crave whatever's convenient or whatever you have in your environment. Every moment you crave something, you're living in the current. We'll go over methods to tolerate our stress and emotions so that craving and escape isn't the only option. We'll also go over several tricks so that even when you still have pain, you can change the direction of the current so it's less destructive or even stop the current altogether. The third step is addiction. You can see that the current has already been flowing for a while by the time it gets here. This is the point where you finally find and get what you're craving. It's the moment where your mind thinks that you need the pleasure in order to get by. A craving is just a want for pleasure, but addiction is the need for it. If all you do is have pain and then crave something, then the current actually stops. Addiction is the next step that keeps you moving down the current. It's the part where the self-destruction began, where you follow through with something that you think will bring pleasure. You might feel like you deserve to do it, or that nothing else works or lasts anyway, or that it doesn't matter anyway because you've already done so much damage. Once we're at the point of carrying through with the addictive behavior, it's time for damage control. During this step of the current, we're just trying to avoid hitting the biggest rocks in the river and get any help we can. It's not the time for deep reflection or lofty goals. We'll go through tons of ways to deal with this, like finding healthier and safer addictions, powerful distraction techniques, and how to plan for relapses by putting a plan in place using help and accountability. The final step is pleasure. Although at first it might sound healthy to escape pain and get all the way down the current to pleasure, it's not usually helpful in most modern life. It's very true that seeking pleasure is exactly what's helpful for most animals, because animals are wired to immediately escape harmful signals like scary sounds, horrible smells, hunger, aggressive enemies, and seek pleasures like a safe environment, the security of a group, calming sounds, or good food. But for a modern human, we can't survive if we always live in the current, going away from pain to pleasure. Nowadays, we have too much access to things like alcohol, drugs, and food, video games, and porn that humans didn't have such easy access to ages ago. It's also too easy in modern times to do things that feel good, like staying home all day, spending money we don't have with a credit card, or being lazy. So seeking pleasure whenever we can isn't actually healthy like it might have been thousands of years ago. And not only does the current of addiction generally lead to harmful behavior or destruction, it leads to guilt and shame. And that's a feeling that starts yet another pain with another current to get away from the shame. So you just end up getting pushed endlessly downstream, further and further, never really living with ease or freedom. It's pleasure, but a false pleasure. We'll go over healthy ways to build your life so that pleasure can come in ways that doesn't hurt you, and so that it comes in such a new and deep way that the false pleasures aren't even tempting anymore. I don't give health a step because it's not even part of the current. Health is when we live outside or above the current. When we live in the healthiest way, we do so just to be healthy. We don't do healthy things so that we feel happy or so that we feel good right away. Living in healthy ways usually brings health, but also sometimes brings pain. It's a way of living that's totally separate from the current, where life isn't just about chasing happiness, it's living in a way that happiness finds you. Emotions aren't avoided, but seen as signals to learn from and grow wiser. Stress isn't seen as something to run away from, but as part of life that will always come. We can learn to weather the storms of stress and tolerate it because we're not entitled to a life without pain. This is backed up by studies that show two of the best traits to have to reach maximum health are tolerance and patience. If there's anything you can teach a child to give them the best chance at success and peace in their life, teach them tolerance and patience. Outdoor enthusiasts have a name for living outside of the current. They call it Type 2 fun. Where Type 1 fun is the immediate and easy fun, like a light hike or watching a sunset. And Type 2 fun is stuff like camping in tough conditions or a very difficult hike or even encountering bad weather, where it's not necessarily pleasant in the moment, but when you're done, the joy and pleasure feels much deeper and lasts longer than the Type 1 fun. They get that the deepest rewards come from things that are challenging and sometimes hard to tolerate. When I see patients get into this zone, that's when I get most excited for them. Once they get a taste of what it feels like to live in this zone, they want more. They can't wait to get another moment in that zone, because it's the only place of real peace. True health is when we do the right things simply because they're healthy. When we work out because it's good for our body and mind, not just to get a six-pack or release anger. Or when we're kind, not just because we want to get something from someone, but because it's kind. Or when we learn so we can grow as a person, and not because we're just trying to get a promotion or get an A. Or when we can avoid using a drug because it's healthy, and not just because we're afraid of the law or a consequence. Life in the current is exhausting, and a never-ending battle of trying to escape things like criticism or low self-worth, but never really getting away. The pleasure we find in the current is actually the farthest thing from true pleasure. Living in the healthiest ways, simply because they're healthy, will elevate you to experiencing life in a way that most people never do. Life becomes fun, which is very different than you might have experienced. We'll finish the program with several ways to reach that level, so that life isn't just about trying to survive this current. We'll teach you ways of growing health so fully that there's no time for addiction anymore. A lot of people who are starting treatment ask me if it's their fault. I hope that after learning the science of addiction and how it actually develops way before you actually became addicted, you can start to believe that this isn't your fault. I want you to hear that again. It's not your fault. I don't care how many people have told you it is and blamed you, but it's not your fault. I'm sure you've made tons of bad choices and hurt people along the way, but you have to ask yourself why you would have ever done that. You are doing it because of your own pain. You aren't responsible for most of the sources of your pain that led to your use. Now that I've said that, I'll also say that it is up to you to fix it. Nobody but you can heal you. You might think that the world owes you, but only you are responsible for yourself. You're not responsible for whatever caused your pain, but you are responsible for fixing it. If you walk on a certain path home every day, and every day some idiot runs up to you and knocks you over, that's not your fault. It's a bad thing that happened to you, and it's going to make you furious and agitated. But it's not that idiot's responsibility to pick you up. The anger he caused you is yours, not his. It's your job to get up. And it's your job to pick a different way home or press charges on him. It's your job to adapt. You're allowed to use help, but help is just that, help. Help isn't something that changes your life for you. Help is just something you use to change yourself. It's not fair, but it's the case. So no, addiction has never been your fault, but it's become your problem and your problem to fix. We'd like to think that our mind thinks and behaves as a unified single person. That's not at all how our minds work, though. At every point and at every moment, if we listen carefully enough, we always have an inner dialogue. Some part of you really wants to do this and is very eager to learn and get healthy for once. At the same time, there's another part of your mind that hates this. It's the part that's going to try everything in its power to get in the way of your healing during this program and for the rest of your life. It's going to say things like, "Come on, man, do you really think this is going to work? You've already tried and failed. What makes you think this is going to be any different?" Or, "You're a bad person, so whatever you do is doomed to fail." It's your own nasty internal bully. It's going to make you doubt yourself, lose hope, feel like giving up, degrade you, and tell you everything that your worst enemies would tell you. It knows just how to mess with you because it is you. I'm here to tell you that that's all normal and completely expected. Let's look at a simple example for a second. If you have a cupcake in front of you, one part of your mind says, "Ooh, that looks good. Let's have it. That'll make me feel good for a minute. One cupcake isn't going to hurt." That's the inner child voice we all have. Then, we all also have another side that kicks in. It starts by saying, "No, that's bad for you. You don't need to be having that. You're already full even. Just leave it. You know better." That's how the inner parent voice starts out. It's as if we're a child and a parent at the same time, having their voices go back and forth in our mind all the time. Now, if we listen even more closely, you'll get to the part where the inner parent voice turns into a nasty bully. After it tells you not to have it, it might say something like, "Oh, go ahead. You knew you wouldn't listen anyway." Or, "You're too weak to resist it. I knew you'd give in." Or, "You're so stupid. You're getting fat and you should know better." That parent in us all isn't always a nice role model that knows what's best. It can be a really nasty bully. A lot of patients I teach this to are so impressed because they think I can read their mind. Far from it. We all have these voices if we listen carefully enough. During this program, I invite you to calmly listen to your whole mind and begin to learn it in this way. In every lesson, a part of you will be excited and curious and optimistic. The other part of you will do everything in its power to make you doubt yourself, try to stop you, tease you, and try to scare you away from the very help you need. That's okay. Know that's coming. And if you don't already hear that voice, listen carefully because it's already there. Don't resist that voice. For now, just come to know it. It's your enemy, but you need to learn it before you can fight it. We'll be going through so many parts of your mind during this program that you'll come to know what you're fighting so well that defeating it becomes possible. We don't ever actually fight it, we just call it out on its BS. We don't cower as it tries to intimidate and bully. We keep our head up with the truths that we come to know. Know it'll always be there, but also know that its only power is through playing on your fear. It isn't real, never will be, and has nothing on you. It's a part of you, but it isn't the whole you. If you have a freckle, it's really there, and it's a part of you, but it certainly isn't you. You just have the freckle, but you'd never say the freckle has you. We can do this with our nasty bully voice too, where we recognize it and admit that it is a part of us, but it isn't us. True health comes when we become the person who observes this dialogue. If we automatically act as the child or the parent in us, we're always going to be sporadic and up and down. That's what makes us act like a hopeful, happy child sometimes, then get upset and feel the shame set in when the bully voice comes back. But when we listen and learn from our mind, calmly allow them each to be heard, and consciously choose to think and behave as the observer, we become healthy. You'll get a lot out of this program if you can let both parts of your mind be heard as you go through all this. So far, we've covered what addiction isn't, what it is, and what causes it. We also went over the current of addiction model that we're going to be using to break it down into all its parts so we can get rid of it from all angles. Understanding addiction is the first step in being able to successfully fix it. Next, we'll start to actually do something about it.